morning, everyone. My name is Jason Lanker. I get to count myself one of Pat's friends. And as he's in Alabama, I get to be here with y'all and continue your journey into the book of Genesis. Specifically, what you've been talking about for the past couple of weeks has been the life of Abraham. I don't know if you personally feel at the same place maybe Abraham felt a few millennia ago when he was asking the question, what do I do? Where do I go? God, speak to me. What's next? If you're like anybody that I've been interacting with this last week, that just seems to be a question that just keeps coming up. Even this morning, as I was just getting ready and getting kind of into the moment here, got to connect with somebody, and they just said, hey, you know what? I have all these great plans. I think this might come together. I might go here. This could. And that's a common part of our lives as humans. We're wondering, God, where are you taking us? Where's this journey headed? And as you read through the book of Genesis and specifically look at the story of Abraham, it's easy to say, you know what, I want to have his life. I hope you don't. I hope you want your own life. Because God has made each and every one of us for a purpose, to bring himself glory, to take us on a unique path. And what he wants to do in each one of our stories is not just take us to some place, but his greatest desire is to reveal himself. It's to show who Yahweh really is. I hope that as you've been here over the past couple weeks, the stories in Genesis have really highlighted that for you. But in case they haven't, I just want to take just a kind of turn around the corner just to be able to say, hey, you know what? There's all this stuff, some of the red stuff, pretty bad. He's lying about Sarah being his sister just so he doesn't get in trouble. Then he's going and defeating whole armies, some of his high points. He's standing up for Lot so that he doesn't get destroyed. But at the center point, and this is how stories were told in the ancient world, you put the most important thing in the center. We put it at the end. The center of this story isn't about Abraham. The center of this story is about a covenant that Yahweh makes with a normal, everyday man that doesn't ever even receive a word from God until he's 75 years old. Have any of you been asking the question, God, where are you? Would you please speak to me? Would you please make this clear? For most of you that I can see in this room, you have a few years. He has time. Why? Because he's an eternal God and he works in his time and his way, not to fulfill yours and my wishes, but to reveal his divine nature. And when we get that aspect of the story, then this story becomes much more real. It becomes much more alive. And so today, if you have your Bibles, or if you're like me most of the time and you have a phone that has your app on there, follow along with me. And the reason why you're going to follow along there is because it isn't going to show up on the screen. I'm just going to read from it because the stories are a little bit longer, and I just want to highlight some of those aspects. And when I highlight them, I'm hoping, my prayer is that you see Yahweh more clearly, that he reveals himself. And not just in a sermon and not just through a text, but in a way you want to experience him the way that Abraham got to. It won't be the same because none of us are the same, right? But he could do something awesome in and through your life if you were willing to just follow him. So how does this story go? Where does it end? Chapter 21 is actually kind of a transition chapter in between the beginning story of Abraham that then moves into the story of Isaac, and it's going to continue on through the progeny, through the children that come after that and continue to move down that line. The first one that we see in chapter 21 is the story of Sarah. He showed up a few times and said, hey, you're going to have a child. And he interprets that with Sarah's help, that it's going to be a child through their maid, through their servant, which was completely a normal thing within their culture. God shows up again and he says, actually, that's not the way that I'm going to produce this lineage through you. It's actually going to be through you, Sarah. And how does Sarah respond? She laughs, okay? And there's a double entendre there, and we'll find it actually in chapter 21. But she laughs, and it's almost, if we could interpret the context, it's a mocking laugh. Yeah, no, that ain't gonna happen, okay? The reason why, because the lady is how old? She's 90. Any of you 90-year-olds out there, any of your grandparents out there that you're hoping just come home tomorrow and say, hey, you know what? Guess what? I'm pregnant. Not the greatest wish for most 90-year-olds. And beyond that, here is one of the most hurtful and painful things I have seen in my years on this earth. It's people who desperately want a child, and they can't conceive. They didn't just try once or twice. They tried for years. They tried for decades. And they finally reach a point where they say, I can't handle it anymore. I can't keep putting myself in that place where we conceived and lost the baby 3 weeks afterwards. I ache every time I think about the possibility. I'm done. I'm done. I want to remind all of us, there is only one immaculate conception. There's only one. So when Yahweh shows up to a 90-year-old woman and a 100-year-old man who have all but given up, and their bodies have agreed with them in that process and all but given up, they don't just have to believe that God is going to put a child in that womb. They are going to have to act in pain-filled faith to put themselves in this place of hurt again. I want to highlight that before I read through the fulfillment, because we're good at getting to the end of the story and not realizing what it takes to get there. And if you and I don't get that, we're just going to want God to jump in and go, hey, your lives are all put together. I promise this. It's all done. It's all on me. And what Yahweh wants to show us is that he fulfills his promises most often through our willingness to act in simple faith. Today, are you willing to act in simple faith along with Sarah and the rest of the people who've gone before us in faith? And the Lord took note, it says in verse 1, he saw, or he visited Sarah, whom he had renamed princess, right? As he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. So Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the appointed time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Any of your Bibles say what Isaac means? It means what? Me? Pregnant? Yeah, no, that isn't going to happen. See how God turns the whole story on its head? He can turn everything upside down if we're willing to simply believe him. Then Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. How many of us are stuck in a story? Stuck in a story we want so desperately to be out of. We don't know how to take a step forward. What could change? What could be different? How do we fix this? How do we make this right? And deep at the depths of our hearts, we laugh with mocking laughter. God, really? This life? This is what you gave me? This? How could you be a good God if this is what I experience? Not only does he provide a child for Sarah and Abraham, her soul so transforms. She says, not only is this a good thing for me, Isaac is coming where? He's coming everywhere, to every single person. Could God transform your story today so drastically that the hurt and pain that defines you, that you name yourself by and others name you by, could be transformed by the God of this universe who calls you his princess and says, trust me in the area you do not want to go in ever again because you are sure it's only pain. He can do it. Why? Because he did it. And this isn't the first and last time. Not only was a child born, but she weaned him. Those of you who are mothers understand just how difficult that is. The miraculous conception, how in the world did that happen? Carry this baby to term, and then her whole body turns back on so that she can nurse this child. Weaning process in those years, about a year to 2 years. God's done something absolutely awesome in Sarah. And what's her response? Do you see this in last verse there? In verse 8, the child grew and was weaned. In verse 7, and she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I've borne him a son in his old age? So somehow she accepts and believes that, man, this life could be created in me. But how in the world was I able to nurse him? Nothing like the rest of us. God does something absolutely awesome in your life, and you're like, yes, God, thank you so much. You're so awesome. That's it. That's all he can do there. That was miraculous. Maybe he's waiting for us as believers to believe that he could do exceedingly, abundantly, beyond all we could ever ask for or imagine. What if he's saying to us, you're not dead yet? The marriage isn't dead yet. The relationship isn't dead yet. The job isn't dead yet. I have good plans for you. Will you trust me more than you trust yourself? It's always good to hear stories from the past, but it's often better to hear stories from the present because we go, well, yeah, but it's in the Bible. So that's Abraham. That's Sarah. But could God really do these kinds of things today? How does that actually work itself out? Every time I read through this, when Pat said, hey, I want you to teach on chapter 21, I kept going back every single time to when my wife and I moved here 20 years ago. She had been a costume designer in Hollywood. We were going to come out to Arkansas for a couple years and then go back to the real world. And then we fell in love with it. But we didn't fall in love with it until her heart was incredibly broken. She took every single penny, every single dream, every single calling that she felt God had put on her life. And she said, I want to make a girls' clothing line. If any of you have been here long enough, you knew Heather Hill, downtown Siloam. My wife took everything she had and said, this is what I think I'm supposed to do. Started it in California, had a good couple seasons, moved here with all these potential connections, and it just seemed like God was opening door after door after door, and we were just going, God, you're taking us on an incredible journey of faith. And we got to our first season here, and it all fell apart, and we lost 6 figures of money in about a 3-month time frame. For a guy who was a pastor and then a professor, I'm not bringing in the bucks to make up for that. And I was done. God, why did we trust you? Why did we go down this road? This isn't going to come together. And my wife just said, you know what? I got a bunch of fabric here. I'm just going to keep sewing. And as she kept sewing, then it turned into a little business, and it turned into a bigger business, and it turned into an incredible business. And by the time she'd been in business for about 15 years, she was netting almost $20,000 a year. And every year this went on, my faith lagged. But over my wife's sewing machines, she had a really awesome quote from a guy named Saint Irenaeus. And it says, the glory of God is someone who is fully alive. Someone who's simply willing to be what God has made them to be. And in a girl who's incredibly gifted with design talent, she said, I'm supposed to sew. Each year I said, no, you're not. This is too much strain on you, too much strain on us. We need to be done with this. You're making nothing out of all that effort. It was painful. And there was no great life being produced in and through our continued efforts. And when we came back from a trip and our landlord had taken away basically all of her space to be able to work in, I saw it as a sign from God. We are finally done. We are finished with this. And I remember one night, my wife looked me in the eyes and she said, Jason, every time God has taken something away from us, he has always put something bigger into our hands if we've been willing to trust him. But I don't want to trust him anymore. I'm tired of all this work because it isn't just you, it becomes us, and it's strain and it's struggle, and you're so talented, you could make so much more. The next day, she's driving down Main Street, and as she stops at the 3-way stop right there by Alpine, God's Spirit speaks to her and says, you know that building right there, you need to go inside of it and ask the guy if he'll sell it to you. She's for sure God is not speaking to her and that she just ate something way too late that night. She drives down to where it curves, and the Spirit said to her, Heather, I'm asking you, I'm directing you, I'm speaking to you like Yahweh has always spoken to his people. Will you trust me and follow me, even though it may take you further into pain? And she turned back around, got out of her car, and stood on the side of the road there and debated on whether she should go in. Finally, she went in, and if any of you have ever been to or seen the brick ballroom, that's not us. Who is that? Who's been revealing himself for millennia to anyone willing to trust him, to be persistent in their faith, even when it seems to be in the face of ongoing pain? What does he have for you? What does he have for us? If you could put that up there, I think that just says it a little bit better than what I just said it. It's a common human issue, right? We give up. We stop trusting. And he says, I don't even just want to do something different in you. I want to do something different through you. I want to make new people. But it only happens when you are willing to be persistent, to know I've called you to this. Not only does he produce a new life in Sarah, but as we continue, Yahweh does this. Now Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. It literally says, guess which word? Laughing. It says laughing. Why does it translate it mocking? Because it's Ishmael doing it. When it was Sarah doing it, what was it? It was laughing. None of us have this problem. When people do the same exact thing that we do, we think there's something wrong with them, but people should understand why we're reacting the way we are. Therefore, she said to Abraham, drive out this maid and her son, for the son of this maid shall not be heir with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because of his son Ishmael. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed because of the lad and your maid. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her. Listen and not just hear. Listen in a way so you can find a way to act on this. For through Isaac your descendants shall be named, and of the son of the maid I will make a nation also because he is your descendant. What's the promise that God made to Abraham in chapter 12? If you leave your family, your father, your mother, all your support system, I will make you what? A great nation. What does he promise to Ishmael through Abraham? God's blessings are not just for you and the people who follow on your paths. God's blessings are for all of his creation. Anyone willing to follow him in faith. So Abraham rose early in the morning, took bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, putting them on her shoulder, and gave her the boy and sent her away, and she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was used up, she left the boy, probably about 15 years old at this point, under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him, about a bow shot away, maybe about 50 yards or so. For she said, do not let me see the boy die. And she sat opposite him and lifted up her voice and wept. Why? And I'm putting words in Hagar's mouth. Why did I go back? Why did I go under this woman that's now kicking me out again? When I could have just been done with this. And now we're being thrown off the side of the road like we're trash. And now we're out in the middle of the desert and we're going to die. God, what are you doing here? God heard the lad crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What's the matter? What's the matter, Hagar? Do not fear, for God has heard the voice of the lad. Rise, lift him up, hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation." God's promises are not just for those who are in positions of power, who have everything that they need to be successful. They're for the destitute. They're for the unwanted. They're for the ones that are that close to losing it all. Maybe they're for you. Maybe they're for me. Then when? When she's near death, when she's hopeless, when she's given up and said, there's no way that this is going to be made right. Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. She see a grand palace with tons of food and no, a well of water in the desert. When our lives are barely hanging on by a thread, what are we usually asking God for? Give us everything. Put it all back the way that it's supposed to be. And we make these grand visions and plans of how life is supposed to be put together. And if God really did his work, it would look like, at least I do this. Maybe nobody else in this room has ever done that before. What does God provide for Hagar? He provides a well in the desert. Something bubbling up out of the sand and the dirt. Just enough to keep them alive. Is he keeping you alive today, just barely? Is he still fulfilling his promises and giving you your daily bread? Is he faithful? Has he ever stopped? God was with the lad, and he grew and he lived in the wilderness and became an archer. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, which is the Sinai Peninsula, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Sarah throws him out on the road because Ishmael is doing the same thing that she was doing when God said she'd give birth to a son. Abraham is incredibly distressed, but listens to the voice of his wife because he feels like God's speaking through her. And Hagar ends up seeing God again. 2 showings, more than any other person outside of Abraham. God is looking for people who are willing to simply submit. What's interesting, and this is a far jump, in 1 Peter, Peter says Sarah is the example of godly submission. Have any of you ever turned in a paper or a report? When you give that to your teacher or your boss, what do we say we're doing with that paper? We're submitting it. Sarah shared what she believed was the right action in that moment. How many of you are keeping your mouths shut to things that you know God wants you to say? Is Sarah's words untainted by her own sinfulness and brokenness? No. But does God work through it? What could God do? And you can put up the next slide there. What could God do if you were simply submissive? How could it shift your story and the stories of others? If you just shared what you believed to be right and then did what's really hard, take your hands off of it and let the other person make their own choices. And wait to see if God actually speaks to them. We tend to go to one extreme or the other. A bunch of us have a really hard time really being truthful. And others of us, we have no problem being truthful. But the reason why we're truthful is because we're going to direct everybody and everything, and we're going to make it all accomplish our will. That's not submission on either side. Can we trust that Yahweh is a God who works in submission and through submission? And the great God of Abraham, who said to him, you know what Sarah's saying, even though it hurts you to do this, I want you to do it just like you're doing it for me, through me, by me. How many of us are willing to make choices against ourselves, stuff that hurts us, but we just know that God is asking us to walk down that road? And we're going to trust him with the results. When did Ishmael become a great nation? That next week? That next month? It took years and decades and centuries for that one man to turn into tribe after tribe that look back and call him the father of their nations throughout the Middle East. Are you willing to trust a God who does not work in the moment? I wish I was better with my use of time and could read to you the last section. I'll let you go back and read about Abraham's last interaction. His interaction with the Philistines and finding a well and everything else. What's interesting about it is that he makes a covenant with this guy. But he doesn't consider the covenant with this man to be how he's going to find success. I'll just give you the point, and you can go back and read it. How many of us work so hard and finagle so much in order to make the right relationships and the right contracts and the right whatever? Because if this comes through, then our lives will finally be right. Abraham gets that, and instead of jumping up and down and saying, wow, I finally worked it, that we can have all the wells we need for all of our sheep, he goes and plants a tamarisk tree. It's a tree that grows out in the middle of the desert, shouldn't grow, and yet becomes it's so wide, it's like 50 feet wide, provides shade for everybody. It actually serves as like an air conditioning unit by how it's all set. It's like the coolest tree in the world. If you're living in the middle of the desert, they're evergreen. Why in the world does that get recorded? Because right after he says, I have a covenant with El Olam. I have a covenant with the eternal God. The last point that I think the writer of Genesis 21 is making is this. Many of us are willing to have faith and persistent in our faith if it blesses and helps us, or it may help someone really close to us. Are you and I willing to have faith in an eternal God who will do his works in people's lives that you will never know, that will live in places you don't even have an idea about? Because his work never ends and his work never fails. What could God do through your life, in the life of people 400 years from now, if you simply had faith? I hope by talking about this, it's brought up just some remembrances of stories of faith that you have had, where you've been persistent, even in the face of for sure pain. And God's changed you. He's made you a new person because of it. And it's changed other people around you. Or maybe there's a point where you have submitted to something and you've said, God's called me to this. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to give it everything that I have. I'm going to say what needs to be said no matter how they respond. I'm going to trust and I'm going to do it the way that it needs to be done, even when it seems to bring hurt and pain to me. And it's shifted entire stories. Things haven't been the same after that moment. Or times when God has just reminded you, it's not going to be done next week. Just keep trusting me, because it isn't about you. It isn't about your kids. It isn't about your family. It's about people who will live and die hundreds of years from now. Because you aren't eternal. I am, though. And I will fulfill my promises through your simple acts of faith. If you have those, as you eat lunch today, as you drive, share them. Share them. Share where God has been faithful, because we don't act until we see he's done it. That's why it's in here. So he didn't just do great things in Abraham's life and then go on. And he didn't do great things in your life just so you could experience it and go on. He wants to expand his story. He wants to reveal his nature. He wants to make everything new by your simple acts of faith. So if he speaks to you today, go for it. And if you got another 70 years, wait for it. Because he who promised is. Because he who promised is. Because he who promised is faithful. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you didn't just work in Abraham's life a couple millennia ago. I thank you that you haven't just worked in my life and my wife's life. I thank you that you haven't just worked in many of our lives. I thank you that you're wanting to work in all of our lives and to never stop. It's hard sometimes because you do not work by our time frame. Not at all. Because you don't live by our time frame. But I know, and I pray that everyone here today will know from actual experience that the one who promises is always, always faithful to the very end. Thank you. Let it be. Amen.